Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Stuff Sewn channel. I've just returned from a very hot, very colorful holiday through the south of France, and I knew in the weeks beforehand that some sewing had to happen. Now, of course, normally when you're thinking about a vacation capsule, you're thinking about simple, versatile pieces which can work together seamlessly so that you pack as little as possible. For this trip though, I knew I needed something different. It was a journey through beautiful places with some people that I really, really love, and I wanted my wardrobe to feel more like a celebration than an exercise in minimalism. I wanted clothes that could handle the French Riviera heat but still feel wearable back in London. I wanted to finally cut into some of those bold, joyful fabrics you've seen in my recent videos. And I wanted outfits that really made me feel like myself again. Playful, bright, maybe a little bit overdressed for a morning farmer's market. In this video, I'm going to be showing you what I made, where I wore it, and the treasures that I picked up along the way. We really traveled by train and car on purpose. Josh and I love a small town detour. So this video is going to include everything from flea market digs to haute couture fabric shops. As I take you through it, I'll talk to you more about how this trip and this little collection really helped me reconnect with my love of sewing. Honestly, between the behavior of the US government and the UK government, I'm spending a lot more time feeling frustrated and angry lately. I suspect that many of you are too. I'm trying to spend a lot more money and time on social justice efforts, and obviously that comes at the expense of my hobbies. This was the chance to make something beautiful in the face of all that. Let's get into it. Now, when I started sewing for this trip, I knew I wanted to begin with pieces that really made me excited. If my wardrobe, let's say, was a meal, these would be the main course. Visually exciting, creatively satisfying, and unapologetically, maybe just a little bit much. But don't mistake the indulgence here for impracticality, because I wore every single one of these to death. Let's start with the one that you guys went wild for on Instagram. This backless beauty made from a vintage Vogue pattern that I was actually recently gifted by one of you amazing viewers. I was instantly obsessed here with the combination of the dramatic open back, tight waistband, and the swishy full skirt. The fabric here is that mustard cherry stripe cotton that I showed you in my spring planning video. I'd originally thought about using that for an oversized shirt, but I'm so glad I waited and did the dress instead. The dress is just so much more me. The pattern honestly is mostly just big rectangles, which really gave me room to play with stripe direction. I did vertical stripes on the bodice and the skirt. I did horizontal stripes for the waistband, and then for the straps I did bias cut straps. It's a little small decision, but I think it had a pretty big impact. Now, as you can probably tell, the pattern here is pretty simple. You basically have an apron front for the dress. You're attaching that to a waistband. There's no gathering or anything there, just some darts in the bodice. And then there's a gathered rectangular skirt attached to it. The only, I wouldn't even call this a tricky part. The only actual meaningful step is just attaching some buttons to the waistband and to the skirt. They're a little bit hard to see because I wanted ones that would blend in. But of course, I should point out, simple doesn't always mean easy. Despite shortening the bodice to account for my short torso, I still ended up with lots of fabric pooling here, kind of at the upper corners. It's a classic problem for someone with narrow, more sloping shoulders compared to their frame. And with a backless dress, annoyingly, it's pretty hard to spot issues until it's basically finished. At first, I considered some complicated fixes here. I wanted to do like unpicking the lining, redrafting the darts, but then I actually took a step back and realized that the fix just didn't need to be that intense. In the end, I kept it super simple, so I'll just show you here. All I did was pleat the fabric at the corners. I just tucked it in on both sides and reattached the straps. That's it. It looks intentional. It looks intentional in the photos. It saved me hours of annoyance over something that wasn't that important. And sometimes it's just good to have a reminder, like, take the easy path. Life is hard enough. Also, I wore this dress in Annecy towards the start of our trip. I'll give you a full rundown of our travels later. And I got, I think, what are the best photos of me ever taken. I know it's vain and it's braggy, but someday these are being framed. I want my grandkids to look at these and be like, damn, Grammy had it going on. Anyway, on to the next. Now, next up we have a very, very different vibe. The striped dress is flirty, sure, it has the backless thing going on, but it doesn't make me want to throw on heels and sip a cocktail. And honestly, I think feeling a little vampy sometimes for a few summer evenings is a holiday essential. Enter this red knit number. It's a little bit hard to see, but of course I'll still include lots of B-roll. This is the Nice Try Tank dress, a pattern that I tested for Forest and Thread. I was so excited to test for Forest and Thread. I think, for those of you longtime viewers, I featured Isabel, the owner and designer, in one of my Sew International videos, and she just keeps rolling out the hits. Now, this might be the most unusual knit dress that I've ever sewn. There are no side seams, and the horizontal strap kind of weaves under the shoulder strap in such a strange and really satisfying way. Because of this, the pattern pieces honestly look really bizarre, but the instructions make this one feel surprisingly straightforward. Even the binding has like a weird construction order, but it all comes together super, super cleanly. I made mine using a modal double knit from Yardblox Fabrics, which is a Hong Kong-based supplier that I need to do a whole video on them eventually. Like, I'm not sponsored by them, I don't work with them in that way, but I think that they have the best selection of knits worldwide. Like, I can't even really think of anyone who might be close. They are also the only shop who I consistently see carry Reformation deadstock. If you're into that, check out Yardblox. Unfortunately, when I initially planned this video, they still had a lot of tariff-free options for US customers. That situation has unfortunately changed in the last couple weeks. You know, I won't belabor the point. The administration changes direction all the time, so, you know, we'll just have to wait and see. As for fit, it's worth noting here that this was a test version, so I think the armholes probably look a little tight, but Izzy had actually already fixed that before testing even wrapped. She's exactly the kind of designer you want to test for. She's talented, thoughtful, detail-oriented. I've done a lot of pattern testing over the years, and you really learn who's like actually doing the work and taking feedback, and who's just using testers for free marketing. Either way, this dress is the perfect combination of chic, it's comfortable, and it's the kind of dress that I threw on and you just, I don't know, you immediately feel like you've made an effort, even if it's been balled up in a suitcase. Exactly what you want from a holiday make. Anyway, let's move on because we have one more dress to share. Now, for the last of my dresses, this is easily one of the simplest things that I've ever made. I mean, I started this on a Saturday at like 10 a.m. and I was wearing it for lunch with a friend, like at 1 p.m. and I was on time for the lunch. The real star here, of course, is the fabric. It's an embroidered cotton with a big, beautiful lace border. Because the lace was so open, the pattern repeat for the lace is so large, I knew I didn't want to have to cut into it unnecessarily. So again, kept it super simple. This dress is really one long panel. It's roughly the height that I wanted for a midi dress and about 1.75x my bust measurement. First, I just sewed it into a tube. The lace section is just stabilized with a strip of organza sewn with a narrow zigzag. I was a bit worried about sewing such like an open lace, but it looks completely fine. It's still invisible. Then after I had my like wide tube, basically, I had hemmed the top. And then after that, it was just rows and rows of shearing. It came together really fast. Then at that point, I decided that I wanted a sweetheart neckline. At first, I had planned like an internal drawstring, some like ruching with elastic. But again, I had another moment of like, why am I making my life so difficult? And I just pinched a fold in the center here and tacked it down. That's it. That's the like that's the intense pattern drafting that went behind this sweetheart neckline. It does actually though give this diagonal seam effect that I actually really love, and it's made me feel really smug. Sewing does not have to be complicated to be impactful, and you can start experimenting with pattern adjustments and little design features really without knowing anything about pattern drafting. Just like play around with stuff, just don't sew it immediately. Looking back, these were definitely the most playful pieces in my suitcase, and now kind of in my wardrobe overall. They weren't necessarily conceived with practicality in mind, but they ended up being incredibly useful, and more importantly, they reminded me of how energizing it can be to just sew for joy first. To pick a fabric that really makes you smile or try a silhouette that you've been curious about. I didn't make these dresses with London in mind, but they've already become part of my regular rotation. Anyway, on to our next set of makes. Now, if our dresses were the main course, these next makes are the dessert. They're quick, satisfying, and made with small, delicious bits of fabric that I had on hand. Both of these are tops, and actually both of them were made using fabrics that I showed in my last video, the Indian block prints from Sanskruti. By the way, thank you so much for your love on the video. I'm so glad that many of you enjoyed it, and I'm really loving hearing what you found. A few of you have like sent me photos of your orders and tagged me on Instagram. Keep it coming. I'm living vicariously through you, and I just think that the shop seems really excited about it, which is great news. So for my first pattern, I'm going to be showing you a wrap top. I know that this doesn't look like anything on the hanger. We'll switch over to B-roll soon. But this is made using the red and white Jaipuri fabric. The fabric is super lightweight, but the colors are really rich. I absolutely love them, and I'm so glad that they've held up. In terms of the pattern, I used the Tudor blouse from Stitch Witch, and that one has been on my list for a while. It's one of those patterns that, again, really simple to sew, but still feels impactful. The pattern comes with multiple options, and I went with the wrap, which ties at the back. The wrap does use more fabric than you might expect, just because those crossover bodice pieces are fully lined, but that also makes the final garment much sturdier. Construction-wise, this is really a fast, very beginner-friendly make. Next time, the only change I might make is shortening the raglan height a little, but that's like a normal short torso problem. I'm super happy with the fit overall. Only comment I would make is that this is already quite cropped on me, and I have a really short torso. I'm shortening bodices typically by like 1 to 1.5 inches. If you have an average or longer torso, this top is going to finish right underneath your bust, like a little bit above your natural waist. Still looks good, but just one to keep in mind. Regardless, I love how this one turned out. It pairs really well with lots of different trousers, and the shape just feels like really romantic and playful, but not fussy. Now, if you remember, I also had that tulip block print remnant from Sanskruti. This was less than a meter of narrow fabric, and I had to account for a really large scale print repeat. No matter, I love a challenge. Conveniently, I've also been watching a lot of Charlie's Angels lately, original trio, season 1, 1976. It's my comfort show at the moment and an endless source of 70s fashion inspiration. You're gonna see a lot more of that inspiration coming through in the next few weeks, but all you need to know for now is that I'm super into halter tops. While browsing Etsy, I came across a set of halter top patterns from a company called Brooklyn Grrl Vintage. I instantly fell in love with really all of them. I'll link the shop below. Brooklyn Grrl Vintage, by the way, has a great selection of digitized out-of-print vintage patterns. She has them in multiple sizes often, really useful if originals or reprints are not an option for you where you live. I made version 2 here, which is a standard halter that's fully lined and very easy to put together. Basically just bust pieces attached to an angled midriff panel. The back was supposed to button up, but I decided that that would be annoying to put on. Also, it's holiday and like there's gonna be a bunch of delicious French food. A fitted top would be really, I don't know, voting against my interest. So with that, we've covered all the things that I made in advance for this trip, but the places I visited, and of course, the fabrics and patterns that I picked up along the way, are going to be shaping what I sew next. From Hermes dead stock to vintage flea market finds, I'm going to take you through some beautiful corners of the French sewing world. Now, this was a primarily like seeing old friends holiday, but I love visiting fabric shops when I travel, and my fiance Josh is really supportive in making that happen. This was also a multi-stop trip, so I'm just going to give you like a lightning tour of the route we took so you can understand a bit more. First, we took a Eurostar from London to Lille, then the train to Lyon, and then from there picked up a car, drove to Annecy, spent a few days there, then to Nice where we met my friends and stayed in a villa for a week. This was like the key friends part of the trip, so you can imagine lots of bopping around, visiting wineries, visiting beach clubs. Then Josh and I drove solo to Uzès, stayed there for a few days, and then that same train route back, Lyon, Lille, and then London. Probably sounds like a lot, but to be honest, we're a lot. Also, it is worth pointing out that Josh is an architect, and he loves visiting historical sites and collecting inspiration for his own work. If there's a medieval building to be seen, Josh is ready to see it, and he is ready to try to tell me about it. I should also point out, it does not matter how hot it is, or how long we've been walking, or if we already saw the same building from 2 other angles. The trip that I just described is me cutting down his ambitions by about half. We started the trip, like I said, with a 90-minute break in Lille train station to make our train connection. Josh, in this case, stayed with the bags while I just legged it into town. For context, the last time that we were in France, we made a similar exchange in Lille train station, and I stayed behind and Josh went out for an architecture walk. A bird in the station shot all over me. It was bad. It was like full Nickelodeon slimed. So this time, I was really grateful that I got to be the one to do the walk. Lille is beautiful, but I knew I only had time really for one stop. I headed straight for Le Coupon de Sommières, which many of you will know from their main Paris location. This is one of their satellite shops, and like the original, it's selling 3-meter cuts of cottons, viscoses, and silks. I was really tempted by this silk with a Van Gogh chair print on it. It was so charming, so unusual, but to be honest, I couldn't imagine a garment that would do it justice. In the end, I came away with 2 viscose prints. The first is a wild paisley with these tiny leopards scattered across it. I have no plan for it yet, but I know that it's going to be a very loud dress, probably one of the last big dresses that I make this summer. The second fabric that I picked up, and you'll see it's not on my typical fabric rolling boards, this is a purple and brown foliage print. It's really really pretty, has a great weight to it. If you notice, this isn't my typical style or color palette, and it's because this one isn't for me. This one is actually for one of my sewing besties, Alex Arnold. Many of you probably follow her on Instagram. We had been talking the previous day about how hard it is to find good purple prints, and then I ran into this. I texted her from the shop, and she replied in less than 90 seconds. It was super efficient. Of course, viscose prints, not hard to come across in the UK, there's plenty of them, but I was specifically looking for something French. Both of these are actually made from a manufacturer called Domotex. and I believe that they're actually based quite near to Lille. They're certainly in northern France. The quality is excellent. They're really weighty. The colors are super saturated. And it's just rare that I get to buy fabric so close to where it was made. Picking up northern French fabric in northern France just feels like the right kind of souvenir. Also, Josh and I really need to go back to Lille and do like a proper weekend break at least and stop alternating between these 1-hour power walks. Now at this point, we're going to skip Annecy because I didn't really do any shopping there and head further south to the French Riviera where we spent the bulk of the trip. As I noted, we were staying at a beautiful villa. Actually, our villa was in Vampy, and we made a few trips into Nice. We mostly stuck to the pool, the beach, and eating very good food. To be honest, there was a very serious heat wave while we were there. But I did manage to make one fabric shop, a little pilgrimage to Wonderland Tissus. Now, Wonderland is an haute couture fabric shop. Think Versace, Chanel, Hermes deadstock. The space was stunning. I really enjoyed browsing, and the salesperson who worked there was just super friendly despite my really shitty French. I'll be honest though, my heart will always belong to the remnant pile. I'm always going to be more excited by a stack of like mystery fabrics at a market that I can dig through than like a perfectly curated shop where, you know, you're not supposed to be touching everything with your grubby paws. Still, I found a few affordable gems, mostly from the remnant rack. The first is a vintage cotton that is here. I thought it had like a very kind of mid-century, maybe 60s inspired print. Interestingly, the selvage of this fabric says that it's in the style of Boussac. Marcel Boussac was a major figure in French textiles and actually I think helped finance Dior in the early days. So I don't actually know if this is a vintage fabric or like a vintage reproduction, but I still really like it, and it was also super inexpensive. The second, actually let me go to the shelf because I didn't pull it off. The second here is just a small piece of Pucci silk. And this one came from the remnant rack. I think I have like an 80 centimeter piece of this or something. So I was gonna do like a simple camisole top, but to be honest, I might just cut it, hem the edges by hand, and have like a nice silk scarf. I don't know. I don't know if this one necessarily needs to be a garment. I mainly bought it just for those lovely colors. Finally, we have the star of the show, the fabric that I was most excited to pick up in Wonderland. I'll get a bit closer so you can see it. Just this beautiful orange and gold. So this is a silk jacquard. I believe it's Hermes deadstock, but what really caught me and called to me was the texture here. This fabric is stretchy. It's not quite crepe, it's not quite jersey, but like it has really quite a lot of stretch. I've never seen anything like it. It also has this metallic gold woven through it, so the sheen is really pretty, and I'm just determined to make something that really shows off this fabric. If you have any ideas, let me know. I'm leaning towards top, but I'm leaning towards the top. I have about 2 meters of this and it's a bit narrow, but send any ideas my way. I'm completely obsessed with this one. The last leg of the trip was just Josh and me again, and we stayed in Uzès, a lovely, beautiful old town in Annecy. This was very much a Josh stop. Lots of architecture to be seen, photographed, and discussed. Still lovely for both of us. I thought that the scenery was gorgeous. Our Airbnb was actually in a medieval stone tower, which felt appropriately dramatic, and we got to spend some time in the Uzès markets, which were great for food and for books. However, I have to say, like so many markets across Europe these days, there was loads and loads of like really crappy tourist tat. You know the kind that I'm talking about, like a shitty tea towel from China with an AI print of the Eiffel Tower on it, stainless steel Temu jewelry, and of course those like quilted Indian block print tote bags, which are 50 euros when you buy them in Europe, or you can order them directly from India for like 10. You hate to see it, but it kind of is what it is. I don't think that the vendors like want to be selling this stuff either. Just kind of the world we live in. I'll leave it at that. But then, just when I thought that I wouldn't find any good vintage sewing stuff at an antique market, we hit the flea market in Sommières. And that was a top tier flea market, one of the best that I've been to globally. This is honestly, again, why we travel by train and car instead of flying, just so that we can find interesting stuff and then haul it back. And right at the entrance of this market, the very first stall we saw, vintage French sewing patterns, I could not believe my luck, and I was able to pick up a lovely little stack of mid-century styles. The brands and eras here are a bit all over the place, and I haven't had a chance to dive into the details yet, but I absolutely will, and I'm going to be sharing what I learned about vintage French sewing patterns in a future video. Some of these patterns are definitely my size. Some of them I know are not even close, but I was just buying them in a bundle. I do trust myself to figure it out though, or at least make sure that these patterns end up in a good home if I won't use them. We also brought home some other bits from Sommières, including a vintage advertisement for each of us. Josh and I really love these as like inexpensive wall art. We buy a lot of them from Etsy. But mid-century drink ads, the graphic design for those, it's like forever top tier. Josh got one for a Quinquana that he really likes, and I got this one for an Annecy drink. I love the style of it. I hate like aniseed flavors. I would probably hate this, but it's going on the wall anyway. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and that I gave you some inspiration for your sewing, wherever you are and wherever you might be headed. These clothes weren't made as the most cohesive holiday capsule, nor were they made to prove a point about rejecting trends. Not Pinterest inspired, not minimal by default, just honest, hopefully lush, and full of color and character. What this trip reminded me is that you don't have to choose between practical and personal. You can make things that serve your real life while still really leaning into what you love the most. For me, that means vivid color, rich patterns, and clothes that feel tied to a place and tied to a memory. Being surrounded by all of that in such a beautiful part of the world really helped me reconnect with why I sew in the first place. I'll be back soon with another video, but if you do want to hear more from me, of course subscribe, but you can also follow me over on Instagram. I'm at the same handle, just Steph Sewn. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!